Excellent. So I'm just going to talk this group through the changes that are proposed in terms of local policing, just give you an update specifically and most notably about neighbourhood policing. So as we move through the presentation, the first thing that we've spoken to our colleagues and our teams around is around demystifying where we are, because there's been a lot of conversation around where we currently are and the rationale and the reasons for doing that. So it's really important that we demystify the rationale and the reasons. And then the other important thing that I just wanted to say is I really like this slide because it sums everything up to do with not only policing but the wider world around. People are usually afraid of change because they fear the unknown. But everything does change, and we do need to move forward, and we do need to make sure that we evaluate where we are and move in the right way to serve our communities in line with the pledge. So this next slide, as you'll see, is some work that I undertook just to understand the parallels between the PCC's vision and where you want to go, the Chief Constable's vision, and obviously things that are coming out from central government. And what it shows is really there's a connectivity around that preventative piece that we talk around, and we know that the work that we've done with the hub, which will come on, but also around responding, making sure that people in our communities feel safe. And this was quite an interesting piece of work when we were mapping out where do we want our future model to take us. So as we go forward in terms of our approach, so the first thing that I really like this slide about being curious and not judgmental, and that is what I wanted our officers and our staff who are working on the programme to be curious around the opportunities and not judgmental about making a decision before we've come to that. And then the next important part is, well, is something wrong with the current model? Is something wrong with the approach that we're taking? And there's a question mark that you'll see in regards to that. And the answer to that is no, there's not anything specifically wrong, but there's improvements that we want to make. There's areas that we want to develop and move forward. And this is something that I've drilled into the teams. So on the whole systems approach, the first thing that we wanted to look at is everything. We wanted to look at the whole command that sits under me, which includes the city, the county, contact management and the prevention hub. So we wanted to look at that whole piece, not just look at it in silos, and that was really important as we worked through. The second thing that we did is we've commissioned a review through Process Evolution, and a big part of that was around surveying our staff as well, the voice of what they believe ought to happen, and they are also masters of their destiny. And we received a real healthy feedback turnover from that group, which enabled us as a chief officer team to start to understand about some of the blockers, some of the inhibitors, some of the challenges that they're facing. You'll notice on the next photo or the image that will come onto the screen around the 360 demand review. So as I said, that process has taken place where we looked at all of the data, the incoming demand, all of the challenges that land into the force through the pipeline of all the various mechanisms that people can report incidents and occurrences, and looking at how can we best service that. How do we drive up victims' perceptions of the police, the outcomes, how do we drive up our investigative standards, and how do we also reconnect with the public, which is also a huge challenge. And also, one of the things that I don't want to do, and I certainly know the Chief doesn't want to do, is to sit at good. We want to make ourselves excellent. We want to make sure that we're outstanding. And the only way we're going to do that is by continuing to move forward. And that's really important for us in this approach. So on the next slide, it was quite important for us in this process to consider some of the strategic risks that we've got. So when we talk about, are we comparing apples and apples? Well, one of the challenges that we've got is in the policing world, we talk about most similar groups, most similar forces. And a lot of the most similar forces are very different to us. Yeah, they might have a similar funding formula, they might have a very similar settlement, but the reality is the challenges that we face here in Nottinghamshire are quite unique, and we've seen that through some of the events that have taken place throughout this year. And I don't propose to go into great detail, but you only have to look at some of the high-level challenges in terms of the deprivation, the issues between the city and the county, the fact that we've got a lot of professional sports teams that we have to police, we've got a very vibrant city and county community. We've also got a great deal of influx of students as a result of the university, so significant numbers in a concentrated area. So all of those things put together, on top of having a world-class trauma centre in the QMC, which obviously has been a huge benefit to our communities, all of those things create demand. The other thing to note is around the challenges that we are cognizant around austerity, that that is never too far away. We've got to make sure that we get best value for money. And I'm not just saying that because Mark's sat next to us, but we do need to make sure that in our plans we do consider around the future, around financial challenges that we may face. One of the big things that I really want to drive, and the legacy that I feel that we all want to leave, is around building a better organisational culture. You've spoken in the earlier questions around the race action plan, you've spoken around violence against women and girls, you've spoken around police legitimacy, we've spoken about scrutiny and supporting young people. These are all things that are absolutely critical in terms of our organisational culture, and we believe that by reframing, reforming and tweaking some of our offerings in local policing will hopefully build a stronger and more unified organisational culture. One of the things that the review identified was that there was too many teams. They identified that there was perhaps a small element of silo working, which is not going to be particularly advantageous when we want to build that unified organisational culture. We want to make sure that there's a one team, a one Nottinghamshire Police ethos, and that sense of togetherness in terms of where we go. And that was something that we factored into our thoughts and very many discussions. The HMIC, well, obviously we need to make sure that we take into account everything that they say. We are consistently working with them, as you know, at the moment, and taking lots of the feedback as it comes through and identifying that. And I think that is only right and proper that we do that, and I know the Chief agrees. Politically, there's a changing landscape continually around what is important, what's in focus. The one thing that I don't think we can ever revert back from is actually around police legitimacy and the importance around connecting with the communities that we serve. That is the underpinning foundation of the reasons why we do this role, and that's really important to factor in. This is pertinent to Nottinghamshire, this next image, but the rationale and the reasons why I've highlighted it is because one of the strategic risks that we're facing is in regards to attracting firearms officers, attracting people to go into that role. And perhaps if you look at that image that is across to the left-hand side around too many teams, we've considered as a senior officer team whether that might have been perhaps an inhibiting factor to stopping people moving through. We need officers to be in those critical roles, and we can see that through what we encountered in Hendricks earlier this year and the outstanding work that they did, but it's important that we don't block that pipeline. The next image that you'll see there is an outstanding detective there with a magnifying glass, but it is a strategic risk for us in the force, and again, something that we've got to be cognizant around in terms of developing our staff, empowering our staff, and making sure that the culture in the organisation makes sure that people do see those opportunities where they can offer best value, and that is something else that we considered. And then the next image that you'll see is in regards to confidence, and that's not an indicator of where we are, by the way. That's just the first image that I could find. And it's really important that that needle for me needs to be on the right. That is something that we have seen anecdotally through the back of Hendricks, we've seen it on the back of Tarlac, we've seen it in a number of investigations that we've run, where community confidence indeed is good, but we need to make sure that we continue that, and we need to make sure that we press our foot to the metal to make sure that that needle stays to the right hand side continually all the way throughout our journey in the year. So moving on to the next slide, the reason why I popped this one on is there's a really good Crest video with Neil Basu, who was with the Met and someone that I
He's a good guy.
look up to and did a little bit of work with. And there was two phrases that I picked out from Neil's interview, which was the top one, to say that this individual led counter-terror, linked in with MI5 and some of the most pertinent terrorist investigations that we've had nationally. The one big takeaway that I took from his interview with Crest was around the importance around neighbourhood policing, and done well, he said that I see neighbourhood policing as good as any crime squad I worked on. The importance around making sure that that information and intelligence is coming through, making sure that we've got that connectivity with our communities. And as the next soundbite says as well, it's really important that we make sure that we've got that our feet on the ground like a home beat team. So the next slide that I just wanted to talk around is restoring critical neighbourhood principles. So the first one, so there's three pillars of neighbourhood policing, but the first, and I believe probably one of the most important ones, is around community engagement, making sure that we understand from our 300 strong neighbourhood team that they know what the communities need, because those nuances will differ from the MPI areas. You know, those 12 areas have got inherent nuances, and we need to make sure that engagement is at the heart of everything that we do. The next thing is problem solving. So problem solving is critical. We see the What Works board downstairs. We see people coming in and starting to bring their challenges and their issues. Problem solving needs to be at the heart of our neighbourhood teams. They need to make sure that at every juncture they're looking around, how do they solve those problems? The ones that come through your door, Commissioner, the ones that come to the Chief's desk. Because those things, if we allow them to develop and manifest, they become bigger issues and obviously start to cause us greater challenges. But problem solving, pillar number 2. Pillar number 3 is targeted activity. Now this is where we'll come on to some of the chat around Reacher in a short moment. These 3 things have to be done in symmetry. They need to be done by every single neighbourhood team, and we can't take our eyes away from 2 and lead ourselves to only 1. We need to make sure that we deal with them unilaterally and with the same level of importance. So moving on to the next image that you'll see on there.
Tug.
I've put on a wonderful picture of Tug because in a really nice sort of way, it's great that he is still, when you ask anyone, particularly of my generation, and dare I say it,
Mine as well.
When people talk about what does neighbourhood policing mean to you in Nottinghamshire, they always revert back to Tug. You know, he owned the square, he was there, he was visible, he was that present.
Yeah.
My utopian vision of neighbourhood policing is that we have Tug Wilsons on every MPI. Now, we're not going to be able to grow them as big as Tug, and we're not going to make them as big as Tug, but what we are going to be able to do is to have those people who are the focal points of their communities, of their home beats, people who they know they can turn to keep them safe. And it's really important for me that we have that in our memory banks as we go forward, because we can't then just live in the past. We need to make sure that we have those challenges of the future as well. So, the present. The first image that you'll see is around Reacher. So, there's a lot of chat around Reacher. There was a number of questions that came in. And what I want to be really clear about is Reacher is a brand. It's not an arm of neighbourhood policing, and it's not something innovative from neighbourhood policing. It is a brand of neighbourhood policing that sits within neighbourhood policing. They are a team that many of us who have been in the job for a long time will remember as a DSU, an NSU, a 6th section. They are a team of people that are focusing, when we look at the data and the metrics, primarily on the targeted activity. Very little in terms of problem solving and very little in terms of engagement, and that's not their fault, by the way. That's the way they've been set up to deal with pillar 3 of neighbourhood policing only. What I want is Reacher, which is going to fold back into our neighbourhood structure. We're going to have no brands. We're not going to call them specific names, going back to the slide that you mentioned about too many teams. They are going to form part of neighbourhood policing. Those skills aren't going anywhere. They're going to get folded into neighbourhood policing, and they're going to sit on the 12 MPI areas as a neighbourhood team. They're just going to get brought into that universal thought process around that is neighbourhood policing. And Reacher and the brand that we've created is a part of neighbourhood policing, and that will still continue. That won't change. The next image that you see is around knives, and we know that this is a really important area of business for us to drive, and we are going in the right direction, and a lot of the engagement work will support us in terms of driving that down even further, because as we build up that trust and confidence with the communities, more information will flow in and we'll be able to tackle particularly those challenges at that youth level. But in terms of knife crime, the knife crime team in the city, that's going nowhere. That's remaining. So that is going to remain in the structure as a separate team, by the way.
Within neighbourhoods. They're
going to be led within that neighbourhood footprint, but they are going to still remain on the patch. The next image that you'll see is something that's very close to my heart, because this is something that is growing. We know it nationally, but we're going to set up priority tasking teams, and one of their main remits, Commissioner, is going to be around organised business crime and tackling those teams that are causing greatest harm to our major institutions. And as we've seen a decrease in burglary over the years, and dare I say it, there's a number of reasons for that. You know, great policing, obviously, but I think COVID has had a real factor in terms of the footprint of where people work now. We're seeing a real drive in terms of this and a real harm that's occurring. And there is an inherent link, I believe, between this and ASB, and 2 key things that are coming into your area. So priority tasking teams will be set up on both areas in the city and the county to tackle these challenges. And ring fencing. So when we say what is ring fencing, you've heard this phrase used many, many times, but in effect what we want and what the Chief has spoken to me a lot about is around those neighbourhood assets that sit on their areas. They are ring fenced. We don't want them being abstracted out as much as they are, because they are getting pulled out to support other events. We need to find other ways to deal with those challenges like nighttime economy and football and public order and everything else that we deal with in this very busy force. But we want to make sure that that 300 strong neighbourhood team remains solid in their area as much as possible. Now, that is the phrase that we want to be, or we have been using throughout this programme, about ring fencing, about protecting those resources and making sure that they are there for their people. So, moving on to the next image around the prevention hub, and going back to that Pelian principle around the absence of crime and disorder. This is where we want to be, and the prevention hub are going to be critical towards supporting us through the problem-solving approach. So we've got ASB problem-solving officers in there. We've got the engagement hub that we've discussed around lots of our youth assets. But that hub is now set up. We've now got the resources in place. We're now starting to see the benefits around the assets that they were and the remit that they were set up to support, and they are intrinsically critical to the delivery and the success of our neighbourhood model. Safer streets, so we are continuing to drive that through, as you can see, and lots of the work that Safer Streets and lots of the product that Safer Streets gave is still really important towards that, you know, in terms of the cameras, in terms of the resources that we've got on area, in terms of the drive as we're moving forward towards the next phase of the ASB principles. So the Safer Streets model still absolutely critical. We've discussed in some of our chat around the mini police, which is 750 strong. I want to grow that, as I've said, aspirationally. I want to get it into four figures, and I want to make sure that we continue as a force to target the most deprived, the most hard to reach areas, because this is where we'll see the greatest benefit, and this is where that ethos of prevention and collaboration is great. Moving on to the next image around the cadets. Again, the cadets has been discussed, and they are now owned. Both the mini police and the cadets sit under the prevention hub in the engagement arm, but that cadet programme continues to go from strength to strength. What I seek to do is to drive that forward. We've got it into a really healthy place in terms of the numbers and also the representation within there. And I understand the viewpoint from the VPC, the cadet team nationally, around this is not about recruiting people for the future. This is around creating good citizenship. This is around providing those people within that product and that programme the opportunities to learn and to develop themselves. But I also take a strong view that I do think that there's an opportunity for the future, not just solely being police officers, but around all the functions that we have, around all the roles that we have in this organisation, and also supporting our blue light partners. So I do take a slightly different approach as well, to say, if we do see, as we have done in the past, some of our most underrepresented communities come into the cadets, and then subsequently turn their lives around, and subsequently then see the police as a career to go to, well, I think that's a wonderful example.
Or even just the police as somebody to talk to.
Precisely.
You know, it's...
Yeah. So without connectivity is again, without people realising it, it's unwittingly critical engagement. It is really important linking in. The next image that you see is around a youth outreach team, which I know is hugely supported around the table, and this team going from strength to strength. And as I said jokingly the other day, and Ramel was sort of my protege many years ago, but he spends more time at number 10 than anyone else that I know, and that is testament to the work that he's done, and that team with Emily and our new apprentice. So I'm really proud of what they do. I think it is a sign of what's going on in the community, that there is even more requirement for their support. And it's what is really important for us is to manage that effectively, to make sure that we can deal with it in the right and proportionate way, and support those that we feel are falling into that gap that the Chief mentioned earlier, around that sort of preventative space before they actually do fall into the realms of the criminal justice system. And 12 areas, consistency, we want consistency across those 12 areas. We want to make sure that every MPI, neighbourhood policing inspector, has got their assets, their resources, they understand the importance of the things that you see on the screen, but they've also got that contact and control with their communities. And that's where I want to get to, that universal approach moving on. So, This is an old image that you'll remember from many years ago around the confidence cycle, and it's as relevant now as it was back then when you see the importance around the pillars of neighbourhood policing, you know, in terms of engagement, in terms of problem solving, tackling it, and then developing that confidence and then driving that community intelligence. I brought this back into the neighbourhood fold. It never really fell out, in all fairness, but I brought this back in as a central a centrepiece of really where we need to get to around the reasons why we engage, and we've seen the benefits of that this year through jobs I won't go through again, but we need to make sure that we fully embed this consistently across all our areas.
Can I just ask, what's NIM?
National Intelligence Model.
Thank you.
Yeah. So if there's no questions around this, I've just added it in just to refresh all of our MPIs.
Yeah.
So the future. So the first image that you'll see is in regards to the importance around innovation, is the ability to see change as an opportunity, not a threat. That is where we want to go to. This programme, which actually it just looks like a gentleman sat on a screen, but it's not. It's going to be rapid video response, which we're going to rebrand in due course to remote investigations domestic abuse.
Oh, I like that.
So that is going to be the name, abbreviated to RIDA. But in effect, we are going to be standing up that pilot team very shortly, which is going to have 1 sergeant and 6. And that team are going to deal with the most appropriate domestic abuse incidents that come in. Is the benefits for this, we feel, are there's no requirement for officers to travel out initially to go and see a victim. A victim, when they call us, are generally at the point when they want to disclose. And if we leave that gap to grow, then there's a chance that they disengage, so we can drive up the positive evidence that we get, the opportunities for positive outcomes, the opportunities to engage them early on, gain their support, and make sure that we can actually safeguard them but lock up the most dangerous offenders.
Will it be able to be captured as used as best evidence as well as the actual call?
Yeah. So it all, and actually the video call will capture the scene and the injuries and the demeanour and all the things that we can then present to the CPS to say, look where we are, as opposed to verbally giving their outcomes. And that is a big thing that we need to land. So that will be coming in terms of the future as well, and sitting under is alignment. Now, why does this rather tatty image come up in front of you? Because at the moment we are somewhat out of alignment. And I mean that in the sense that we've made decisions for the right reasons at the right time, but now is the time to reconsider the alignment. And the alignment that I discuss is that all of our response teams, all of our custody teams, which will be moving back onto a 6-on-4 off, our firearms teams, which are currently on 6-on-4 off, and I'm very supportive of them remaining on that, and our control room teams are all in line. They are all in line, which creates that symmetry, which I think is very important for teamwork, very important for sharing of information, very important in terms of driving that sense of positive service delivery. And we need to become more efficient. We need to make sure that we drive out inefficient demands. So that's right care, right person, which we know is coming. Making sure that we look around antisocial behaviour with the pilot that's coming on, Commissioner, to drive out any inefficient demand and dealing with it at source. So efficiency is something that I want from us upstairs in terms of the contact centre. So, in summary, a summary of the changes. So our response establishment, including our supervisory, is going to grow. I didn't put an image on that, but our response establishment, which we're taking from within, is going to grow from what it is currently at 485 to 590. We are adding in additional supervisors at our 2 prominent areas where we understand and realise through data analysis that we are understaffed, should we say, in terms of the first line supervisor, which then affects in terms of our positive outcomes. So we are growing those at Mansfield and at Radford Road. There is going to be a collaboration in terms of the CRIM and the MIT.
They fit together, that makes sense.
They lock together, don't they? So they're going to come under one command. And we feel that there'll be able to be efficiencies that can be derived from that. We can drive through better service delivery. We're moving police officers into contact management. We're moving a small number of police officers in as dispatchers to provide some surety when we've got gaps, but also around providing their experience as officers to drive that efficiency as well, and provide support to those around them. You know about the ASB pilot approach, which we're going to be launching very, very soon, which will then dovetail into the Outer Court Disposals Board.
So that's the IJ bit of it, isn't it?
That's correct, yeah. Right care, right person, which we've touched upon. Neighbourhood ring fencing, which I've already discussed. the alignment of custody response and firearms, and also contact management, which is not on there, and rapid video response with a new name. So there are a summary of the changes that we're making, which I can assure you have taken an awful lot of time and hard work to get to, but we feel that these nuanced changes will provide us a better level of service.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Chief, because this is the stuff when I interviewed you, which is just over a year ago. You've been working for us now, but this is all the stuff we spoke about. Yeah. So I'm thrilled to see how it's all coming together.
There is just two final pictures as you go through, Dan, which are on the conclusions. There's two things I just wanted us to remember. Just if you move on two more, Dan, and then that's the final bit. In everything that we do, we've got to remember that every contact leaves a trace. Whether it's our core handlers, whether it is our police officers on the street, whether it's our PCSOs or our staff supporting people, every contact leaves a trace. And if we all can remember that within the command, then we will deliver an outstanding service. And that is really where we need to be. And
it's not just within the command; it's within every police staff and every police officer, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Just reflecting, there was a lot there, and it reminded me of when we first spoke about trust, team, together, and tomorrow, because that's all really been covered. And I know we've spoke about this before, but I actually didn't realise you did a staff survey. And I'm really pleased that took place, because bringing the team with you is so important. Lots of questions, but if I could start with about ASB, is one of the main things that comes across my desk, and people, it can have devastating effects on people's lives. So it needs to be taken really seriously. And in paragraph 3.1 of the paper, you talk about hotspot policing patrols, and I'm really conscious that there's £1 million coming in April for many hours of hotspot patrols. So is that the other way around? Thank you. How are we assessing the impacts of hotspot policing patrols, thinking of this exciting new project we've got coming in April?
Yes. So in specific to your question around the new approach that we feel will be of benefit to us, is we are actually going to be putting people specifically into contact management to identify that ASB as it comes in, so we don't leave that ASB incident to grow in effect, because generally they're not graded as immediates unless there's some rationale and reason to do that. So we'll be putting people in to triage that at first contact. We'll also be revising our processes and our policies, making sure that we're actually crystal clear on what we can do, and identifying where we can utilise options with the out-of-court disposals framework that we have to ensure that we can deal with people in a summary justice manner far earlier than we probably would do. And that's the way that I feel that we will start to develop that programme. We're embedding it, as you saw in the programme and the presentation, there's 12 force areas. All the MPIs have been briefed around it and the importance around ASB. We also have various initiatives going into the What Works board to start to make sure that we can feed that learning out to the wider force. And the importance is understanding the data. So we've got Power BI at the moment, and we have our local operations meeting and local tasking and force tasking. This is about making sure that ASB is at the forefront, and I do believe that by ring fencing our officers, by making sure that they're more visible, they're more active, they're more approachable on area, that we're going to start to drive this down, because it does differ from area to area. ASB in the city and the Victoria Centre is inherently different from what it will be in Bulwell or Top Valley.
Absolutely.
And it's about making sure that those individual areas understand how, if untackled, it can start to grow and cause further problems and challenges. So I'm very confident with the work that we've done, working together with your team and with the local leads that I've got in my command, to ensure that we can get the pilot up and running, refresh our process and policies, dovetail it into out-of-court disposals, seek to deal with people more effectively and more efficiently, and start to actually generate further information intelligence from our communities where they know that we're actually going to take something absolutely in the right vein that they're reporting it.
That's really reassuring, because you're right, it does spiral if you don't nip it in the bud quickly, and I think the public will be really happy to know that there's a really robust approach going forward. I loved how you spoke about the legend that was Tug Wilson, and that every neighbourhood should have a tug.
Yes.
We all want to more visible and neighbourhood policing. At the moment, neighbourhood policing teams are already holding beat surgeries. I just wondered how well attended are they, and what can be best done to promote them to communities and to increase levels of involvement.
So I was going to answer this.
Yeah, sure.
That's okay, Commissioner. So we do have a mandated requirement for regular beat meetings through the Police Reform and Social Responsibility Act. But as we've discussed, the different communities require different types of meetings. So whilst we make sure we have those regular meetings, they're not always the same in each area. But what we do is we monitor them through the prevention hub to know that, to check that they are happening. So what we have are two types really. We have like the traditional events where we advertise them through things like Knots Alert and at libraries and whatever, inviting people to come along. And then we also have what we call pop-up meetings, where we might sort of put them outside libraries or retail premises where we know there's a lot of footfall, where people can then take the opportunity to engage with us as and when they come across us. What we're finding at the moment is the pop-up surgeries that we're getting more engagement with, probably because of where we're setting them up. Less with the sort of traditional meetings, but I think there's need for both. So it's much important that we maintain those. What we have done, which is really interesting, is we've got a newly established team at the university. We've got 75,000 in that university community. So we've done quite a few pop-ups within the university, utilising that new university team to reassure students, to engage with them, to speak about how they can make themselves safe, how the expectation of them new into an area. Young people, we can really sort of engage with them and address some of their concerns as a group, really. We also, as I say, we advertise on using Knots Alert, we use social media to talk about when we've got events. But what we also do as well is we attend other partners' meetings as well. So I know you've asked quite often, you've challenged me about what we're doing around working in partnerships. I know that's important to you. So we make sure that we, where there are events organised by partners and it's appropriate for us to attend, we'll attend those as well. So we do as much as we can to try and ensure that we're engaging with communities and getting that information from them. It's obviously critical to everything we need to do.
Thank you. And that's really reassuring. I found that as Commissioner, it's easier sometimes to go to events where other people are going to be than having your own event. Get more engagement that way. And you're absolutely spot on, Chief. And I think those partnerships are vital. Paragraph 3.4. What has been the impact of the introduction of touch points, and how do these differ from beat surgeries?
Okay, so touch points, we've implemented them in the rural areas of Bassetlaw, Newark and Sherwood. Really, what the geographical challenges are, and in terms of people being accessible but also being able to respond. And it enables us to put people in places where they can deploy quicker to any issues within communities and also sort of respond quicker to geographical areas. At the moment we have 5 that exist, and it's basically an additional space where officers can base themselves to work away from their station. To provide that contact point as well. So what we've also done with those touch points, we're also using those to do some pop-up surgeries as well. So it enables us just to reach out further into the organisation. Sue spoke about challenges around austerity and estate, and we know all of those, and a lot of those conversations that we have quite frequently. So this is something that we've put in place to try and address some of those concerns and to reach out wider in some of those more vast geographical areas that we police.
Thank you. I really welcome all the conversation about mini police. It would be great if we get to 1,000. I'd be very supportive of that. What factors do you consider for choosing which schools to engage with by the mini police? And
so on the document we discuss a number of factors to look at, but predominantly, as I discussed in the presentation, around low trust and confidence in the police, which we'll get through various surveys, but also a sense of feeling. High levels of deprivation. So, for instance, we look at free school meals as an indicator in certain areas where we know that there's going to be a greater challenge, and then also high percentage BAME areas, because we understood that there was a challenge around trust and confidence, in particular with those communities. So that's how we select those schools. We also would attend various meetings. So, for instance, we went to the Nottinghamshire Education Trust, and when we first started the mini police and started to discuss the process and the programme, and quite frankly, at County Hall, we could have filled it 10 times over. The desire to have this is huge. What we needed to make sure was that we didn't, and you know, I'm very open to having a critical conversation about this, but we didn't want to go for what we felt were the easy options. You know, the schools whereby trust and confidence in the police is already high, whereby people see the police in the right light. That's the easy option. We need to go into areas where we've got to work hard, we've got to support those communities, and we've got to support those young people who probably haven't had the easiest start. So that's how we get to that point.
Because that way can make maximum impact, can't it, Chief Superintendent? What are your ambitions for the cadet programme? And I know that it's, you know, getting volunteers it can be challenging. I mean, after COVID, I think volunteering has been difficult for lots of sectors.
Yes, absolutely. So the ambition is to start to drive further bases up north. So when I say up north, works on moving it into the county areas, into the more rural areas, where we understand that there is quite rightly a sense that we might have created them more centrally within the conurbation. So it's important that we start to press that out. We have got various plans in place, because it is predicated on volunteers, and obviously that's the difficulty in terms of people giving their time up during the evenings and to support this programme. And the importance for me is to make sure we have consistency of leadership. So there's absolutely no point in me sort of selecting a number of cadet leaders who just keep rolling in and out, because there's going to be no consistency of programme. So there is some work underway, Commissioner, to try and identify how do we best identify cadet leaders who are going to provide that proper support. And I do believe that through the presentation, when we start to talk about actually reducing the abstractions and ring fencing, by doing that we will start to give people more time and more capacity and ability to do that.
Because it can make such a difference.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
And I really thank all of our volunteers who are doing it at the moment.
Oh, they do a wonderful job.
Thank you. Moving on to paragraph 3.4. Listening to local communities, speeding and reckless driving remains a real priority issue. It's one of the top concerns. What is the vision for further rollout and promotion at Nottinghamshire's Community Speed Watch Group?
So we see this as really important, and it goes back to that sort of that community ethos of, you know, the police of the public and the public of the police supporting us. So last year we implemented a programme where we expanded our community speed watch. So there's 19 currently across the force area, which I think is a very healthy number, requiring a minimum of 3 volunteers per area. And I can vouch, because I went past one the other day, so they are actually out there using the new kit and equipment. We've spent a little bit of money on 5 new kits to get them out, and there's a new policy in place around safeguarding and support, because clearly we're asking people to undertake what can be a relatively dangerous but very important bit of work. And what we don't want to do is leave those people isolated, because we understand the majority of places that do this are rural. So really robust risk assessment that's been put in place, and a policy. But I think and I feel that 19 is a really good spread across the area. We are now, as you know, doing the pilot around Street Watch. So that might garner further interest to then dovetail the two together, because Street Watch and Community Speed Watch feel like they're very similar animals. So actually, by doing those 2 pilots that we discussed previously, I think that there'll be the opportunity to drive this out further.
Okay. Paragraph 4. So beyond crime reduction, what other metrics and mechanisms are being used to assess the impact and effectiveness of neighbourhood policing activities across Nottinghamshire? And what are the metrics telling us?
Yes, I mean, this is a huge question in terms of, you know, I could spend hours talking about the metrics. Ultimately, where we want to get to is that Peelian principle of the absence of crime and disorder is the sign of success. we're never going to get there. Let's be brutally honest that there will always be a need for us to support that. So the local priorities are set by the neighbourhood teams through surveys, through findings from the OPCC, local public feedback, engagement with our local authority partners who we work really closely and effectively with, and utilising their data. As you know, Commissioner, we set up Knots Alert.
Yeah.
So Knots Alert is bringing back feedback, a two-way interface with our community so we can understand what is occurring. The beat surgeries that we have, then they feed into our local operations meeting. So there's all that connectivity around what matters to that specific area, and that will be driven back in. If it then reaches that threshold to go into the force programme, then it will come into force tasking, but very rarely will a local neighbourhood problem ever get into that world. It will generally be dealt with at that first point. The other thing that we need to consider in this answer is we now have Power BI. Power BI is really effective. It enables every neighbourhood policing inspector, it enables me and the chief on a daily basis to click in and go into a ward or go into an area and understand what does that crime picture look like, what's occurred over the last 7 days or 24 hours even, and we can start to understand the picture far faster and far quicker than we ever have been able to do that before. That enables us then to be more effective. I believe that Power BI has actually been a factor in our positive outcome rate increasing.
Yeah.
So we're at probably at the highest point in terms of our regional partners and standing very well nationally. And that sense of drive and focus and having our people on the ground understand what's mattering and what's occurring and what the issues are has helped us in that position.
Thank you. And you touched on it, Chief Superintendent, during the presentation, but the Operation Reacher, and it's a brand, but it's been very popular and been a lot of trust and confidence built around that. So, and you know, as part of the demand review, the consequences, the amalgamation of Operation Reacher into neighbourhood policing teams.
Yeah.
What would you say to the public about that?
I want to reassure them that the principles of Reacher are in fact embedded into neighbourhood policing.
Yeah.
So that targeted activity that we discussed during the presentation, but the engaging the communities and the problem-solving policing, all three need to be done. So what I want to reassure the public around is that the brand that was created under Op Reacher, we're focusing predominantly on one of the strands of neighbourhood policing. I want our neighbourhood teams to be supported to deal with all three of those.
Yeah. We've
spoken about the abstraction, so Reacher will be pulled out quite a lot.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that our neighbourhood teams are focused all the time in their areas, making sure that they are dealing with the challenges that matter to the communities most. Let me just be really clear and alleviate any fears that the work that Reacher are doing is not going to stop. They are just going to become the neighbourhood teams, and the neighbourhood teams are going to take that on, much like they did when the Chief and I were on area many years ago.
Yeah.
So that the sense of the brand has overtaken actually what the reality is as that occurs. Yeah. And when we have done some time and motion studies around Reacher, we have identified that their targeted activity is wonderful. You know, then we're talking about 90% of their total time is on targeted activity. But I want them also to be doing problem-solving policing, to identify what they need to target. I want them to engage with the community, to reassure them and make them feel safe. So you can see how the connectivity needs to be there to make sure that we have a proper and robust neighbourhood policing offering.
Yeah, and one team that's really valued.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I've got some questions from the public. And the first one is from Robin of Sherwood. Now, back in the day, there used to be a TV programme, Robin of Sherwood on a Saturday night. So but the question was from Robin, what is the neighbourhood policing team and Nottinghamshire Police doing to reduce the numbers of children and young people being criminalised because of poor policing and charging decisions?
So I'll take that to Commissioner, because I think whilst the reference is made to the neighbourhood policing teams, I think this is more of a
much wider question.
And I think as a force, and certainly my approach in leading the force is very much that we want to make sure that we, where appropriate, we do divert young people away from the criminal justice system, albeit there's always going to be a balance as to what the most appropriate method is, and we need to be mindful of that. So when we look at our figures of young people going into the criminal justice system, it is high, and it's something that we need to look at and to try and understand. So in terms of understanding that, when we look at the number, over half of the number of people that go in are for offences which relate to violence against the person.
Yeah.
And of that, half of those are actually knife possession offences. So what I'm trying to say is knife possession takes up quite a lot of those numbers. And some of those involve young people possessing knives on school premises as well, which is obviously really, really concerning. So in terms of the weapon offences, we have had a previous approach to these, which was to sort of coin a term that I know perhaps has been used before, around zero tolerance. So young people in possession of knives were put straight into the criminal justice system. That was the previous approach. What I've done since I've taken over is reviewed that, and I think we perhaps need to look at what the national guidance is, and we've actually amended our approach now. So it's not that sort of one-size-fits-all. We're trying to then make it a little bit more bespoke and more focused on if there are opportunities to divert young people, then we will do this. So we've changed our approach, but I think it's worth saying that still, if you are a young person caught with a knife under the age of 15, you will, more than likely you will be getting a youth conditional caution.
Yeah.
That gives us an opportunity to do some diversionary work with you, but that reflects the seriousness of these offences as well, and the problem that it blights on the communities, and we know that lots of people are fearful of knife crime. So, in addition to that, we also need to do some work around prevention, and we do a lot of work with young people that you know about, and through the Violence Reduction Partnership that you commission a lot of work. So this isn't just about our criminal justice approach. There are other complementary approaches that we're using. Yeah. But any young people that are arrested with a knife, they will go in front of the multi-agency panel, which will involve other partners as well. So this isn't just about the police approaching this. We will use with Youth Justice Service, probation, CPS, and the council support, Children and Young Services support there. So we then enable us to have that more joined up approach to actually how are we going to address this issue, and what will our approach be with all these individuals. And we look at trauma-informed approach and also ACEs when we do that, so adverse childhood experiences. So we're trying to have that holistic view to do that. So at the moment, that's still relatively new. That started in October, so it will take us some while to see some of the reasons for that. But I think what we just need to also consider is when we look at the panel and the sort of factors that they're considering, there'll be things like the level of injury. If it is an assault, it'll be the voice of the victim. Also, if there's no full admission, then a community resolution is not possible. Yeah. So it's we do need to understand some of the factors that take part in making these decisions. But I think really, in summary, what I wanted to get across was we are keen to try and make sure that children and young people don't need to go into the criminal justice system. They won't. We are doing other work to try and, in terms of diversion act. I know Sue's already spoke about some of the outreach. All those other things will complement this. And we have changed our approach now, albeit only recently, that we'll probably see some results. But the reality is there are still occasions when it is appropriate for young people to go through the criminal justice system. Yeah,
and I'm really keen that children and young people don't make the decision to get themselves carrying a knife or doing something they should be doing in the first place, which is why that preventative work is so important. I've got another question from Mimi from Eastwood. Are there any educational or rehabilitative interventions in place in response to antisocial behaviour, much like we have for speeding, like online courses?
Do you want me to take that, Chief? So, as you know, Commissioner, there's and in answer to the member of the public's question, is that there's 12 school and early intervention officers that we've got embedded into local academies. And we really do focus hard through those SEIO officers to provide educational inputs to divert young people away from ASB and crime. So that has been a core part of their role. We realise that actually they absorb a huge number of pupils through that programme, and those educational inputs are designed to drive and divert people away from them. As you know, the Safer Streets funding has been used to provide educational inputs and reopening of youth clubs as well to support various groups. And that will address ASB and other key issues. So, for instance, in Top Valley we had the deliberate fires, which through some targeted work it eradicated it all and stopped it immediately. We've already discussed at length throughout here our youth outreach provision and the work that the Engagement Hub does. The other thing that's not wasn't captured in the presentation was the Youth IAG and the work that came through from their forum, from their end of year report, which I've shared with the command, and we're now looking at how do we interact better with them, how do we absorb and deal with some of the challenges that they've identified, one of which was ASB.
Yeah.
You know, that feeling of being safe in the areas. ASB hotspot patrols, as you know, within the hub we've established ASB and problem solving officers, so we can start to drive that forward. And the What Works board were discussing ASB yesterday and some of the challenges linked to football and young emerging hooliganism at Notts County at Mansfield. So there's lots and lots of work going on. I think immediate justice with the ASB programme will be critical towards diverting people away and starting to try and use summary justice, if that's the right phrase. So I think that there's an awful lot of work that is going on around this particular challenge.
Yeah. Will any of the antisocial behaviour reach a level that would work with the RJ?
Yes.
As well?
Yeah, I believe it will.
Yeah.
So that we're going to have various discussions through the out of court disposals boards around sort of thresholds and where do we feel that various elements sit. But I mean, probably the inconsistency with the phrase antisocial behaviour is antisocial behaviour I've seen has been used in everything. You know, it's even been used in knife carrying, serious disorder, elements of retail crime have been described as ASB. So it's about us pinning down what do we feel is ASB and starting to drill into those sort of that low level element, which and I speak about this quite a lot when I talk with people. That I remember offenders from when I started over 20 years ago who were very young, creating sort of local ASB challenges. Those people now, because they weren't dealt with, and we didn't have the mechanisms that we have now, by the way. But if they're not dealt with at the first point and supported and diverted and prevented from getting back into that arena, they're soon going to accelerate into an area of far greater harm. So it's important that we utilise all those products that we've discussed earlier.
Thank you. The next question is from Peter, who's a councillor from Newark and Sherwood. What resources can be allocated? Let me try that again. This question is from Peter, a councillor from Newark and Sherwood. What resources can be allocated to police traffic regulations, e.g., it's very specific here, a ban on traffic in pedestrian areas of Cartergate, Newark, a ban on no right turns into Hallerton Road in Westgate, Southwell, as these are often ignored and present a risk to pedestrians.
Okay, so there are some very sort of specific points, but I will just answer sort of more generally to start with, and then I'll move on to the specifics. As you know, road safety is a highly reported issue. In almost all of our neighbourhood areas, speeding is one of the local priorities. We've already talked about some of the work we're doing around community speed watch and what we're doing around that. Police, obviously, we have a role to play in that, but we also work with partners in relation to police traffic regulations. We work closely with local authority to ensure that we've maximised any structural improvements we can to try and prevent to design out any breaches. So specifically, the areas asked about were Cartergate. So the local neighbourhood team are aware of the concerns there, and they've obviously been raised to them. And I know that the District Council are working with VIA in relation to the structural changes, and I think they're considering fixed bollards or camera monitoring. As from a policing perspective, we're aware that the problem has been recently exacerbated due to the disabled parking allocated on the stretch of road. So what we've made sure we've done, we've had some enforcement sessions in the last 3 months to try and make sure we're monitoring that. So we recognise there was a problem, but whilst that's being sorted out, we're trying to sort of mitigate any other factors that are causing concern. So we are doing work along that. We've been issuing warnings, publications via social media, and we will carry on doing that as we move forward. Hallerton Road, the local neighbourhood team in Southall spend a lot of their time dealing with speeding, parking and other road-related incidents in this area, and we will continue to work with the local community to understand what the issues are, but also to raise awareness of what the actual regulations are that are in place, because I think sometimes there's not that understanding, so we need to make sure people are aware of what they need to do. So we're actually working there with the community around that particular issue.
Thank you. And a last question from the public. This was an anonymous question. a little bit follows on from the last one. Why is so little attention given to ensuring road safety for disabled people across Nottinghamshire?
Okay, so in relation to this question, I know there's a specific incident that's raised, and what I would ask is that whoever's asked this question, if they would get in touch with us so we can try and understand what the actual issues are. It's really difficult for me to answer without knowing more factors, but you know, I would ask that this person gets in touch with us so we can understand that. We need to understand the details regarding the vehicle location, the danger it caused, and the actions the officer's taken. We do have powers under legislation around leaving vehicles in dangerous positions, but in making any of those decisions, we would need to ensure, as I said, I've just mentioned, we need to understand what the location was, what the danger was, to try and understand what's happened. So I would ask that this person gets in touch with us, because you know, we do need to make sure that we are making sure that where everybody is safe on the roads, and that we're not sort of neglecting any members of our communities, and I'd really like to understand exactly what's happened.
Thank you very much, Chief. So that's the end of the questions on neighbourhood policing, and we'll crack on with the other bits now. Thank you.
Thank you.